So in this video, I would like to explain the structures of sentences and their order of words in Russian. Russian has many sentence structures upon which we can express any sentence, phrase, or statement in any way. In English, this concept tends to be simple because the word order is fixed, such as starting a sentence with a subject, then a verb, and then an object. This word order is known as subject-verb-object, or SVO. While that's formal both in English and Russian, Russian has many sentence formations that can change depending on the emphasis of the words. The object can be moved to the beginning to emphasize it, while the subject is in the middle and the verb is in the end. The verb can also be in the beginning, while the object is in the middle and the subject is in the end. These formations can combine forever, so they generate a different emphasis depending on where the words are placed. Russian does that because it is expressive, allowing the speaker to say any sentence in any way. This concept can be understood using the 6 Russian cases or expressions. For foreign learners, it may be very confusing as to why Russian does that, but once the cases are understood, the idea will be much simpler. As someone fluent in Russian, I highly advise to try to understand the 6 Russian cases before you approach the sentence structures. Because sentence structures and word orders are complicated, they will be the final topics before I explain basic Russian phrases and fundamentals, which will be in the next video. For now, it's important to understand that while a specific word order creates a different meaning, it's the intonation and the emphasis that is placed on a specific word that makes the most difference in determining the meaning of a sentence. That's why in Russian, it's about how you speak and not so much what you say. So in Russian, you have to pay more attention to how words are said, but you still have the freedom to be expressive with your statements. In my opinion, it's better to invest in the cases and get familiar with the Russian Cyrillic alphabet before trying to understand how sentence structures work in Russian. As someone who's educating about Russian, I can tell you from fluency that translation will not work most of the time due to the various formations and meanings and context. So it's objectively better to try to understand sentences empathetically and visually. This video will not have a lot of examples in order not to create more confusion about the topic. More or less, the examples will be simple to understand, involving both meaningful and visual comprehension of each phrase, starting from the very basic SVO construction. To show this idea, let's focus on any 2 cases. Let's take the nominative and the accusative. Throughout these examples, you'll see that the form of each word is always the same, so listening-wise, there isn't anything complicated. However, while the meaning will be the same, the choice of word order will change the emphasis, style, and context of the phrase. That's why the emphasis is put on intonation, which determines the meaning of a sentence, as opposed to having a strict word order. Let's take a look at this simple structure, which I will change throughout the video. Я вижу стол. I see a table. We can visually tell that the subject is я, the verb is вижу, and the object is stol. Я is the subject expressed in the nominative, hence it's in the dictionary form, and stol is in the accusative, which is an inanimate direct object that doesn't change form, because it's masculine. Then, we have a conjugated verb вижу for the pronoun я, which is a concept for a future video. Still, the sentence structure is SVO. Я вижу стол. The meaning is essentially neutral, because it's formal, so there isn't anything special with this phrase. Now, we can have the same phrase, but with the object in the middle. Я стол вижу, which is visually, I, a table, see. In this phrase, the cases still match the words because the form of each word is always the same. Я is still in the nominative, stol is still in the accusative, and вижу is a conjugated verb in the present. The meaning, however, is different because it emphasizes the type of object that the subject sees. Я стол вижу. The emphasis is put on stol because it's the object that the subject engages with. This construction is SOV, which completely doesn't work in English, but works in Russian. This is one type of a sentence structure. Now, we can be informal and put the object in the beginning. Stol, я вижу. A table, I see. It's still the same phrase because again, the cases match the words. Stole is in the accusative and ja is in the nominative. However, the meaning is different because it's a pensive statement that emphasizes that the subject sees the object. Stol ja widzę. A table I see. This sentence structure is OSV, which when put in English looks like it was taken from Old English. A table I see. Even though this meaning can somewhat work in English, it's generally not considered formal. In Russian, it's a sentence with an informal tone, and it's a type of construction that you will mainly see or hear within informal conversations. Next, we can put the object in the beginning and the verb in the middle. Stol widzę ja. The sentence is still the same, but visually it's a table see I, which doesn't work in English at all. Stol is still in the accusative and ja is still in the nominative. But the meaning is different because the emphasis is on the fact that it's the subject who sees the object. So it's an expression that shows something factual. This construction is OVS, which isn't used that often in Russian, even though it's possible to use it. Now, we can put the conjugated verb in the beginning and the object in the middle, which is the least common sentence structure. Widzę stol ja. This sentence is still the same, but visually it's see a table I, which cannot be expressed in English. Stol is still in the accusative and ja is still in the nominative, but the meaning is different because this construction is declarative with a poetic undertone. In other words, it's a structure that you will see in old Russian poems and books. In modern times, this construction is almost never used, but it's still possible to use it. At last, we can put the conjugated verb in the beginning and the subject in the middle. Widzę ja stol. See I a table, which doesn't work in English. Stol is still in the accusative and ja is still in the nominative, but the meaning is different because it's a reflective statement that emphasizes the subject's action for the object. This construction is actually very common in Russian, so you can expect to see it a lot. Overall, these are the sentence structures and their word orders in Russian. Considering that basic sentences contain 3 words, subject, verb, object, these words have a total of 6 different combinations that they can be placed in. However, it doesn't mean that you're forced to remember and use each combination and understand what each combination does. In fact, half of the structures that I showed are not even used when reading or speaking, so at the end of the day, you can freely decide which combination you want to work with, because regardless of how you express yourself, you will still be understood. Now, to ensure that this concept is still understandable, I will demonstrate all of the following examples once again, but this time with a different case, subject, verb, and object. Specifically something feminine like Ona idет к машине. She goes to the car. A native Russian speaker would pronounce ona as она. We can tell that the subject is она, the verb is идет, conjugated for the pronoun она, and the object is машине. Она is in the nominative, but машине is in the dative because it's a feminine noun that ends in a, so we change it to ye. In this phrase, we're using a different grammatical case which will not make a difference in the order of the words. This sentence structure is SVO. Она идет к машине. The meaning is neutral because it's a formal phrase, so there isn't anything special. Now, the sentence is Она к машине идет, which is visually she to the car goes. Она is in the nominative and машине is in the dative, but the meaning is different because it emphasizes the type of object that the subject goes to. Она к машине идет. The emphasis is put on машине because it's the object that the subject engages with. This construction is SOV, which doesn't work in English. Now, the sentence is к машине она идет, which is visually to the car she goes. Она is in the nominative and машине is in the dative, because again, the forms of the words do not change regardless of the order of the words. This structure is OSV, which is somewhat possible in English, very common in Russian, but generally speaking, it's informal. Now, the sentence is «К машине идет она», which is «to the car goes she». «Она» is in the nominative and «машине» is in the dative. This structure is OVS, which is not possible in English and is barely used in Russian. Now, the sentence is «Идет к машине она», which is «goes to the car she». This structure is VOS, which is a poetic undertone, again impossible in English and almost never used in Russian. Now, the sentence is «Идет она к машине», which is «goes she to the car». This structure is VSO, which is very common in Russian but impossible in English. At last, I'll replicate this concept with a neuter noun with a different case, subject, verb, and object, like «Ты в море», you are in the sea. In this case, we have a simple example that can only have two possible combinations. The first one has a neutral meaning because it has the SVO structure. Ты в море, you are in the sea. Let's not forget that Russian doesn't use the verb to be in the present and doesn't have articles, which is why you don't see these words in Russian. Technically speaking, because Russian doesn't have the verb in the present, we can count it as an SO structure. We can tell that ты is in the nominative, but море is in the prepositional, because this case is used after the preposition в. Море is a neuter noun that ends in ye, so there is no change to it in the prepositional. The second possible structure of the sentence is OSV, or simply OS. В море ты. In the sea, you are. Ты is still in the nominative, and в море is still in the prepositional. So this structure is somewhat possible in English, very common in Russian, but is in fact informal. This is how sentence structures and the order of words work in Russian. In this video, I've given a simple explanation of the types of structures and order of the words that you can see when learning Russian. Even though I gave somewhat of a vague description of how this concept works, there's a good reason behind that because it's the final topic that I decided to show before jumping into basic Russian words, sentences, and fundamentals. This idea of combining words in a sentence could have also been done with adjectives and even question words, but I chose not to include too many principles because it's too early and too complicated to learn for now. Obviously, I'm not expecting anybody to form sentences the way I showed because it's a primary principle that Russian has. It was more something to recognize and understand, rather than something to use for now. In the future, you will of course use it as you wish, but in my opinion, it's better to understand how and why Russian has this fundamental than to be confused in the future. This principle will make future concepts simpler to comprehend because you will see it in many Russian texts and future videos. In conclusion, this was sentence structures and word orders in Russian, and the next video will fully be dedicated to basic Russian fundamentals.